Hey, I think I'm live. Okay, so this is a test that I'm doing. Uh, yeah, I want to get into it. Basically, last night I woke up on fire. There's this idea I've been working on for a very long time. I actually presented this idea about 6 or 7 months ago, and I've been thinking about how to get this information out to more people. And then I just thought I'll just do it. I'll just make a just quick presentation on it, and I'll just do it and I'll send it out, and see how it goes. Yeah. So here's the thing, right? Um, most of how we assess couples is broken. And I think there's actually a really simple fix, which, I think is a surprise because most people would say, wait, couples assessment is broken. What does that even mean? I don't think most people don't even know that it's broken. Um, but before we get into the brokenness of it and the details, I want to talk about why I think that it's important that we fix couples assessment. It's because I think a lot of therapists walk around feeling like imposters. And I think that they feel like imposters because they're actually not good at what they do. This is probably going to shock a few people that I said that. But I think what happens is, like if you're like me, right? You're like, man, I don't feel like I'm doing this thing right. So you go into your supervisor, and your supervisor says something along the lines of, it just takes time. Keep hanging in there. Um, you just got to work at it, right? You're actually doing great work. And it's like, okay, you're my supervisor. I should believe you, right? Yeah, my couples are still fighting like every single session. Yeah, I had a client drop out again uh, after I tried everything that I knew what to do. Yeah, um, I'm sitting with this couple and like they keep having the same fight over and over and over and over and over again. But yeah, I'm actually doing good work. My supervisor said so, right? And so what happens is, in my opinion, a lot of people actually aren't good at what they do and they know it. And when they ask for help, what happens is supervisors, mentors, teachers, coaches, whoever gaslight them. Say, no, actually, you are doing good work. And I think that's actually a big detriment because if someone has the audacity and courage and just the like tenacity to come to someone who's higher up on the status chain and say, I'm not doing well, I need help. I think we should help them instead of saying, "Oh no, you're doing great," and then they're confused because their own experience is so contradiction to their actual to what they're hearing. So I think this is a big problem, and so I think that the first step is to actually train people well, and I think this is needed more than ever, especially in couples therapy, right? And I think the first problem that I see is that couples assessment is like just fundamentally broken. It's fundamentally broken. And so I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about why it's broken. We talk about how to fix it. We're gonna talk about like actually like showing you the skills that you can use to fix it. And then I want to show how the fix, I think, changes everything, sets everything off in a totally different direction. So let's sort of dive in and talk about why couples assessment is broken. So the first thing is, I don't think most people do couples assessment. Like when I was taught in my MFT program, we weren't taught how to do assessments at all, at all. And we weren't taught, yeah, like it wasn't even talked about. Like, just crazy, I think. I mean, it sounds absurd, but it's just true. Like it was never even talked about. Yeah. And then what happened was because I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, right? So I'm literally talking to myself in the past right now. I went on and I got trained. And the model that I chose was EFT. And I think EFT is a phenomenal model. I think EFT is easily the best training experience that I've been through in learning a model easily, hands down, right? I'm also a big common factors person, and so I don't think it's ethical or true to say that EFT is a superior model than other models. Um, but I'm just saying, for me, for how I understand the world, uh, EFT resonates with me. But I also make a very nuanced point. If you think about how you structure a training, right? How you are clear on the goals and objectives of each day of that training, EFT's process, I think, is superior to anything else I've been through. Um, and I think that's a large part of their success is that the way they structure their training, the way they format the training is hands down like really clean. It's really clean. So I have a deep respect for EFT. But if you go through EFT, uh, you will notice that they don't do much on assessment. Um, and so I want to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to run you through a quick vignette. Okay. So look at the vignette on the screen. Tom W. is of high intelligence, although lacking in true creativity. He has a need for order and clarity, and for neat and tidy systems in which every detail finds its appropriate place. His writings were rather dull and mechanical, occasionally enlivened by somewhat corny puns and flashes of imagination of the sci-fi type. He's a strong drive for competence. He seems to have uh, little feel and sympathy, a little sympathy for other people, and does not enjoy interacting with others. Self-centered, he nonetheless has a deep moral sense. So I know this is like a total right turn, but I promise you it's going to come full circle. So just bear with me. As you read over this prompt, I want you to ask yourself this question. What is Tom's major? Most likely. Is he more likely to be a computer scientist, library scientist, an engineer? Is he into social science? Like just what's your sort of initial response? Okay. This is really important. You have to write down your answer. If you don't write down your answer, honestly, later, whenever we get to some of the other stuff, it won't make any sense. So you have to write down your answer. So take a second, on your iPhone, text yourself A, B, C, or D, and take it from there. Okay. So back to EFT. Uh, they, when I went through my training, one of the things that they gave us, because they don't do a lot on assessment, is they gave us what's called this attachment history, right? They had all these questions, and the questions were things like, to whom did you feel comfort when you were young? And I ask this kind of question to people all the time. And people will say things like, well, I was kind of a mama's boy. So I go to my mom, but that was when I was young. Later, I would go to my dad for advice, like when I was older. And I would think, okay, got this information. Um, and I would use this information to formulate my thoughts about the client, right? And I want you to think, I want to write this down as well. What do we know about this client? Possible strained relationship with mom? Is his dad overly cognitive? What does that mean by his attachment style? How he relates to people in his relationship? Maybe how he relates to other women or to other men? I don't know. Like, you just take a second. This is another thing where if you write it down, you're going to get so much more value out of this. If you don't write it down, um, it's not going to hit the same way. It's not going to make sense. So just take a second. What do we know about this client? Okay. I'll let you pause the video. Write down your answer. So I want to talk about this guy. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He is a giant in the field of behavioral economics because he's actually a psychologist, right? Which is like, what? Basically, Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist who his work was so groundbreaking and so profound that he won the Nobel Prize in economics. Just think about that. This guy's work is so foundational. It's so huge. It moved the field so much that he got a Nobel Prize in a field that he's not even in. He's not an economist. He's a psychologist. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing that he's done this. His latest book is called Noise. You should all read it. Uh, but I want to talk about his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, where basically it's his lay book for people talking about his Nobel Prize winning research, the book is all about how we have these cognitive biases, right? And a cognitive bias is basically a fancy way of saying we make thinking mistakes. We make thinking mistakes. And the problem with these mistakes is that we don't even know that we're making them. So if we return to the example of Tom, this is pulled straight from the book. This is your last chance to actually understand what's going on. I'm about to give you the big reveal, so write down your answer, right? What is Tom's major? Most likely to be. The answer is social science. He's most likely to be in some sort of social science field, right? Now, if you read the description of Tom, it sounds like social science is the least likely. It's the least likely. So how is it that Tom is actually more likely to be a social science major? It's because it's because if you look at the actual numbers of students and which majors are the most popular, social science is a more popular major than engineer in most universities, right? So just looking at the base rate of numbers, at the numbers of students, it's most likely that Tom is actually in the social science group than it actually is in the like a computer scientist or an engineer or a library science degree. And what Daniel Kahneman found was that our brains we automatically assume that someone like Tom can't be a social science major. He doesn't fit the stereotype. And the bias comes in is that the assumption happens automatically. And so most of the time, we don't even know that we're doing it, right? So we make this cognitive leap, stereotypes Tom, make this cognitive thinking mistake. But the real trick is that we're not aware that we're making that mistake. The way the information is framed about Tom automatically leads us in one direction, which is direction away from the actual reality, right? And what I would say is that the same thing happens when we look at things like the attachment history questionnaire, right? Let's go back to this. That we make the same sort of thinking mistakes, right? We make these same sort of assumptions that this client has a possible strained relationship with his mom, or his dad is overly cognitive, or he has issues relating to men or women or whatever, right? We make these same sort of thinking mistakes when we ask these questions. Now, I want to be very clear, right? I have made the same mistake. I made it multiple times. I used to give out not only the attachment history, but I would also give out the ACE trauma questionnaire. And it would have questions like this. Did a parent or other adults in your household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that you might be afraid that you might be physically hurt? And I would ask this sort of question, or I'd ask an attachment sort of question. And the assumptions I would make about clients, I think, was just totally wrong, right? Or rather, not that it was totally wrong, but it was full of these sort of cognitive biases, these sort of thinking traps that sort of push me in poor directions. And so my experience has been that asking these questions is actually really profound in individual therapy. People will often share things with you that they have not shared with other people ever before. And that experience of sharing with another person, with a caring, open, receptive therapist, It's oftentimes the best part of therapy for many people. So I think this is very appropriate for individual therapy and individual sessions. Um, but where I think that this falls apart is that when we put forth these sort of questions as a way to assess in couples therapy, it leads us down. Uh, it leads us into cognitive traps, right? I mean, if I'm going to assume that because you had an adult uh, who will swear at you, like I still have no idea how you actually respond when you're sworn at or insulted or put down in your current relationship. I have no idea. I have no idea. I think the same is true for the attachment history questions, right? Of so that happened to you in the past. You talking about that with me in an individual session is very, very helpful for you. But I have no idea how this impacts. I still don't know what's going on in your relationship today. And I think that this is really important because the goal of a couple's assessment should be to assess what the couple does in the present that hurts their relationship. Like that's sort of like I think the heart of it, because that's what has to change. That's what has to change. And so we need to be very, very clear on what they're doing in the moment. Luckily, I don't think this means you have to reinvent the wheel, right? Because we have one of the most important people of all time. He's already fixed this, John Gottman. So that's what we'll talk about in part two. Is Gottman is the big fix to how we assess couples. So if this is interesting to you, feel free to subscribe, or I don't know where I'm going to put this video, but yeah, we're going to do a deep dive on how you can use Gottman's model of assessing to really get a clear picture of what happens in the room so that you can actually change it. And I think this is the big thing, is that once you can really see clearly what's happening in the room, right? Instead of getting trapped by all these cognitive biases, instead of doing all these thinking traps that you're not even aware that you're doing, the clarity it brings in the room, I think is huge, at least for me. I'll speak for myself. The clarity that I now have working with couples, I'm telling you, is night and day. Uh, so yeah, that's part one of this presentation. If you enjoy, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll subscribe or do something like that. I don't know, but follow me wherever you follow me, and I'll keep pumping this stuff out. Okay, talk to you later.